as we spend this time today honoring our ancestors, and we'll be touching on a little bit of grief and honoring the loved ones that have passed over to the other world in this past year. Hello, Tatiana. Hi, Todd. 50% Scottish, 50% Germanic, and back 200 years. Beautiful. Yeah. Wish I knew more about my Black African American side. Yeah, that is definitely something to grieve, and I will share a little bit about difficulties that block us from being able to connect with ancestors, and that's one of them. Yeah. Yeah, so let's just go into that then. Talking about difficulties in connecting with our ancestors. As I was reading things around, realizing that a lot of cultures are detached from ancestors. You know, there are, and it tends to be most of the westernized cultures, whereas a lot of, you know, I live here in India, and ancestors are very prominent in the Hindu culture, at least here. And, you know, pretty much you go into any Hindu house here and they have images up of their parents, of their grandparents, and even like right now, because it's cold season, it's winter. Like my father-in-law has pictures up in his room, and they make these what's that paper called that's like really thin that you can like almost see through it. Why can I not think about what that's called? You like use it for crafts when you're like tracing paper, something like that. Tissue paper, yeah, Tatiana, it's like tissue paper. So they have this paper that you put over a picture, and then it has a circle for the face. So then you put this tissue paper over the photo, and it has like this circle for the face, and they put that on their ancestors' photo during the winter so that they don't get cold. And I think that's just really cute. Like this way of like honoring your ancestor through this image, making sure they don't get cold during the winter. Okay, so Tatiana traced back to the first boat of women brought over to settle Canada. Interesting. Oh, you're Métis and Eastern European. Okay. Wow. When was that? I've also been able to trace back to two of my ancestors were on the Mayflower. They did not make it through the first winter. They both died on during the first winter when they arrived here, and then their children came over after, which is then continued on the line for me here, or not here in India, but in the United States where I was born. Kathleen, Irish, Scottish, French, and Welsh. Yeah. Martha, 1 year for Christmas, my dad had me and my siblings a family ancestry book, and he has researched and made the book. Oh, that's really beautiful. Yeah. And like ways in which we can honor and pass that down. That's really beautiful. So talking about like, you know, I grew up in the American culture, and a lot of the culture is very death avoidant, right? And I'm sure a lot of you, yeah, like, did you grow up in a culture that was more death avoidant? So it's like a lot of focus is on trying to stay young, right? And like live as long as possible. Death is not really talked about at all. Just like in any normal conversations, it would never be brought up. Thinking about like the rituals around death, and the ones that I have been a part of and have experienced have been like quite quite shallow in substance and very quick in time duration. And, thinking about like the time we get off, or the time in the US culture, the time you get off work for like bereavement leave, is like, I mean, I don't know what it is now, but it's only like your closest relative, you get what, like 2 weeks off? And like for more distant relatives, you get like no time off at all. So there's not this culture of like honoring that that part of the cycle of life and death, right? Of just allowing people to grieve and mourn. And I have then seen that to come down to how we can feel connected to ancestry, right? So when you're in a culture that is death avoidant, they're most likely going to be avoidant of connecting with ancestors as well. Whereas in other cultures, like here in India, like there's a long mourning period after somebody dies here, and there's like lots of rites and rituals that go along for like at least 2 weeks after somebody dies, and then even like a year anniversary, sometimes 2-3 year anniversaries, they have like these big celebrations and parties and things to honor that that beloved that has passed over. And so then you see that reflected in the culture by, like I said, in the Hindu culture, you go into a home and almost everybody's home in the Hindu culture has images of people that have passed over, parents and grandparents and things like that. Joanna, Black, Italian, German, Jewish. That is a mixture. Love it. I shared previously that we have proof my great-grandfather was forced out of Germany. So I will be able to get German citizenship by descent. My grandfather doesn't necessarily agree that I should get this citizenship. Yeah, that's a hard one to decide. His perspective is more negative due to the Nazis, but my reasoning is more about connecting to my ancestors and heritage. Yeah. There is a lot of stuff to unpack. That's another difficulty that we have to face when connecting to ancestors. Depending on, what ancestral lineage you're coming from, there are going to be things in there. And I guarantee with all of our ancestral lines, right? There are going to be things in there like wars and slavery and colonization and all of these things that can block us from being able to, just like that desire to connect to different ancestors of our past, and being open to doing that work, because there's a lot of darkness and a lot of shadow there. But I also believe, like, if we're not facing those shadows, right, if we're not bringing them into the light, then we're somehow like carrying it on within us and probably within our subconscious, as some of those ancestral traumas that we are holding on to. The Filet de Roy, the King's Daughters. Not sure the year. Family member followed back. I've not researched. I will go look. Oh, I love that. I love like when you can find an actual story. That's really beautiful. I found a story with one of my ancestors being I'm probably not going to get the name right, but they were like a sheriff of some county in England, where they were like the main caretaker of this castle. And so my sister and I have a plan to travel to the UK, hopefully in the spring, depending on pandemic situation, but to go visit that castle and be like, my ancestor was the sheriff that was like, the caretaker of this castle and the people who stayed here. So yeah, if you can find like actual stories, that brings a deeper connection, a more like personalized, right, connection. Okay, so let's talk about some other things that may be blocks or be difficult for us to connect to our ancestors. If anybody, if anybody in your ancestral line has been like adopted, you might find it, it might just part of the family tree, the family line might be cut off because there's no information from anybody previous to that person who was adopted. You can still work with if you are adopted, you can still work with your adoptive ancestry as well. Because, like, we don't have to only work with our birth family if we don't know a lot about our birth families. We can work with our chosen families as well. Because, if you were brought up by adoptive parents, a lot of times, like, you're carrying a lot of that energy from their ancestry and not just your birth ancestry as well. So there is still opportunity to connect there. People in the past that would have been lied about their biological parents, like I was just thinking about, like teenagers that would have been having kids that had to, had some other family member take care of them, or, some distant relative, things like that. So, somewhere along the line, if somebody was lied to about who their parents were, people who were stolen from their parents, like in the slave trade, like people who were stolen from their country, from their land. Like it can be really, yeah, it can be really sensitive and triggering to connect in with these stories, and some of it can lead to some, some dead ends, I guess. And so that's just like, I feel like when doing ancestry work, there's sort of like this one side of ancestry work, which is very rooted in the actual people and like their actual stories and that actual land they are from. And then there's this more spiritual side where we can connect with the energies of our ancestors, even if we don't know their names, even if we don't know where they are from. Just having some communication with them and them revealing themselves to us. So there's sort of like, and it's beautiful if those two can connect together, but if one or the other is not available for you for whatever reason, there's still different opportunities to connect in with that. Also, if you have a very difficult relationship with your living family members, so if you have a strained relationship or with your parents, or your parents left you, or any of those, it might become difficult to think of like, well, why would I want to connect with my ancestors when I can't even connect with my living family members? And so that can make it difficult to do some ancestry work as well. And just being aware of that, and also being aware that your ancestors prior to your living family members are very different people, and they will have very different energies when you work with them. And I guarantee you, like, how many ancestors we have, I guarantee you there's somebody in your ancestral line that you will be able to connect with. Coming into the last point then, it might be hard if you think about like the person of like who you are. If you think like your ancestors won't be able to accept you for who you are, and thinking about people that are, in marginalized communities that have, like different gender, sexual identities, people in interracial marriages, thinking about ancestry, that those things were not possible, to have and be expressed during that time. So there could be some hesitation that if you connect with them, they might bring like shaming energy or judgmental energy or something like that. But like I said, like our ancestors go back time immemorable, for until like the beginning of humankind. And so I guarantee you there is somebody there, even if it's again just that spiritual connection that you can have with somebody in your line that's going to accept you fully for who you are, and is going to be like a loving, supporting energy and guide for you. Yeah, so that's some difficulties, and then I'll share about how we can begin to work with them. Amy, my grandmother committed suicide. Today I finally am finding strength in her. As a younger woman in 5 cycles, I felt haunted by her, even resentful. My mother kept it from me, but I remember asking her at 9 years old if she killed herself. I don't remember even knowing about the word suicide then. I just felt it in the silence. Yeah, that's so hard. And that goes back to the point I was sharing earlier, like when we are avoiding talking about death, when we avoid having that space to grieve and mourn, then that goes into the unconscious. It goes into the shadow and can be passed down throughout, the lineage. Um, and so, like the more comfortable we can become, bringing it out into the light, sharing these stories, even if they're really difficult stories, and sharing our connection to death, because it's inevitable. We're all going to die one day, and so by avoiding it is not going to make it disappear. It's just going to again push it deeper into the unconscious and deeper into that shadow. Thank you for sharing that, Amy. Thank you for allowing us to witness that. Hmm. Um, yeah, so how let's talk about how to begin working with ancestors and our dear loved ones who have passed over. The first thing I want to say again is that, like, you don't have to work with anyone that makes you feel uncomfortable or unsafe. So I guarantee in all of our lineages, we have people, who were racist, who were misogynists, who were slave owners, who were corporate capitalists, who were, people who were very judgmental and shaming. Like we all have, these seedy people that have come through. And we don't have to work with them. Like, you don't have to. Even if, like, you're in a meditation, you're in some sort of communication space, and somebody like that comes through, that's where you can put a boundary up and say, like, no, I'm not communicating with you. I am not, I'm not opening up myself to that energy. You can just go on your way and put that boundary up. Unless you're in a space and you want to work with that shadow, that ancestor is bringing through, like, fabulous. But if you, at any time you feel uncomfortable, you feel unsafe, like, you don't have to work with anybody. Yeah. Another thing you can do, like more practical things, researching your genealogy. And that again is a lot easier for some of us, and a lot harder for others. For some of us, there would have been very meticulous records taken, and passed down. And for others that are, again, adoptive, were in slavery, indigenous, all of these things that might be a little bit harder to research and find those things beyond those that are still living. But again, it's not needed. It's not needed to connect, because we still have that. The energy is still there, even if you don't have, their names and those things written on paper. Yeah, and then just like giving your ancestors the space and asking them to come through, asking them to communicate, asking them to support you, to, yeah, just like show themselves to you. And like if you sit down at your altar and you open up this space and you ask them to come through, it may happen right then. You may feel that sense right then, or it may take time. And especially if you're just beginning this work, if you're just beginning to communicate, it may take some time for somebody to come through, or for you to actually feel that energy coming through. So don't give up if you don't feel that sense of connection on the first try. You can keep trying for some time and letting them have the time to come through. And then trying different modes of communication, because different modes of communication may work with different ancestors. It may work differently with you. So thinking about different divination tools, you know, if you work with tarot or oracle cards, those are great things to work with to get messages from ancestors. If you have a pendulum, if you work with pendulum, if you work with runes, if you work with your dreams. So like if you ask your ancestors to come through and then you have this dream and it is like, oh, I think that was an ancestor that sent me this dream, or there was this symbol in my dream that I think connects me to a particular ancestor. Like take note of that. Take note of your dreams as you're asking for communication from your ancestors. And then also like signs, symbols, synchronicities that connect together. Noticing those as you go about your normal day life. Those could be things that your ancestors or those that have passed over are sending to you, for you to just recognize and be aware of their guidance and support with you. And altars. Having something either on your regular altar for your ancestors, or having an actual ancestor altar that you keep that you keep up and ready year round, can be something that you can do. And I'll share a little bit more detail when we come to the end and the actual rituals to do. Oh yeah, and then having a ritual that you do more regularly. So I was thinking about, as I usually do, thinking about putting this into the context of cyclical living. And so if we think about the cycle, each season of the cycle holds a different life stage energy. So the So we know the winter is both the death and the rebirth of the cycle. And so thinking about like the end of the winter coming into spring, that would be like the birth, and then the spring is the child. So spring holds the energy of a child. Summer holds the energy of an adult. Autumn holds the energy of the elder, and then the winter. And it would be like that end of autumn, like coming into the winter season where everything has finally like let go and died. It has succumbed to the winter season. That would be the energy of the ancestor. And so if you're doing like rituals regularly, if you wanted to do one every month, I would do it either at like the end of the waning moon, like right before the new moon, maybe like a day or two before the new moon. Or if you're working with your menstrual cycle, working with that very end of the cycle, those last days of the inner autumn. If you feel that shift into the inner winter before you actually start bleeding, maybe doing it like in that space, doing any sort of ritual to connect with your ancestors at that time in the cycle. And then yearly, ancestor work usually, the height of ancestor work usually happens around Samhain, which is the beginning of November, which again is sort of that transition space from the autumn coming into the winter. And then here in Yule, we usually have one day that is one day that is for honoring those that have passed in the last year. As we're coming down to the end of the year, honoring those who have passed in the last year, and then any ancestors that we want to come in and support us at that time as well. Okay. I'm just going to share. So what we're going to do, we're going to have a silent meditation today. And we're going to do it for 12 minutes, 1 minute for each month of the past year. And we're going to do it mainly to hold the silence for those that have passed in this last year. So I just wanted to share a little bit about about grief before we go into that silence. And then I'll share a little bit about how we're going to do that meditation together. So grief. How many of you are familiar with grief? Familiar with mourning a loved one? It's been quite a long time for me. I have to admit, I don't feel that close to grief at the moment. And yeah, I'm thankful for that, but also, yeah, honored that I'm not as close to that in this moment. And also knowing that that can change at any moment, right? Yes. Intimate friends, unfortunately, yeah, some of us will be very intimate friends. Feeling pretty close to grief this year. Yeah. Thinking like the last time somebody really close to me has passed was probably my grandmother in 96. So it's been like quite a long time for me. Yes, grief in the end of a 38-year marriage, grief at the death of a twin brother. Yeah, very fresh as a good friend committed suicide a couple months ago. Yeah, so we're going to bring, if you have specific people, we're going to bring those in before we go into our silence together. So what do we do? What do we do with grief? And for those of you that are familiar, or for any, at any time in your life, you've been in a grieving period, if you don't mind sharing, like what are some things that people said to you that was not helpful at all? I just watched a TED Talk today where this, really lovely woman sharing about the death of her husband and best friend, and talking about, like the things, and she's part of a group of people that are all widowed. And so she was sharing about all of the things that were told to them as they were in their grieving period. And I think it's important to share those things that are not helpful, that are not supporting, so that we ourselves do not continue that. We don't do that we don't say those things for other people that might be in their grieving period. So if you have something that, that was said to you, or that you've heard that was not supportive and not helpful at all to hear, please share with us so that we can have that wisdom to pass on. Lady, yes, grief, but I also feel thankful for their life and my time with them. A good friend passed. Yeah. There's many different. I'll talk about grief. Like grief is it's not linear. It's very. I would say. I don't know the word for it. It's a spiralactic. I don't know how you turn that into, to work in that sentence, but yeah. This too shall pass. Not helpful. It's for the best. Oh, yeah. Regarding your marriage. Not helpful. Don't say he or she is in a better place. Oof, especially after suicide. Yeah. Helpful in with loss and grief to hook up with a survivor support group. Yeah. If you can can be surrounded by community that are not going to say these things, that's a beautiful thing. He's in a better place. We lost him too. Oh yeah, that feels so invalidating. Oh, I lost both my parents 1 month apart from each other and was told, you are now an orphan and will have to live accordingly. What? Kim, I am so sorry you had to hear that. Wow. Oh. Hi, Anne. I'm glad you're here. I find silence most honoring. It's difficult to hold a conversation while with grief. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, in the video, and something I really loved what she shared. She said um, one of the least helpful things that people shared with her was saying, it's time to move on. It's time to get over it. You know, like there's a time limit to our grieving. And again, that's putting grief back into a linear form. And you know, I'm sure you've heard like the stages of grief, right? And that actually makes me quite upset. It makes me quite upset, these stages of grief, you know, saying that like it makes it seem like grief is um so like cut and dry, so tidy, right? That everything has a stage and you just have to work through all of these stages to get to the end and then you're completely healed and everything is okay. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way. You know, for those of you that haven't heard the stages of grief, it's that, you know, first there's denial, then anger, then bargaining, then depression, then acceptance. And then, you know, finally, once there's acceptance, you never have denial or anger or bargaining or depression again. Like, I don't understand how that even became so popular. I don't know how that became a thing. For any of us, you know, that have gone through periods of grief will know that that's not how grief works. It doesn't work in a linear way that we just go from one stage to the next. Like I said, it's much more like a spiral or like a cycle where you're going to be going through many different emotions and experiences as you know, continue the grieving process. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I hate that saying. Yeah, yeah. I do not like that either. I did want to share that the second part, though, was beautiful. So in this video, she shared, you know, the least helpful thing people said to her was to just, it's time to move on. It's time to get over it. Get on with your life. And she said so much beauty in this. There is no moving on. You cannot move on from love because love never dies. Like there's no moving on. You know, the amount of you know, that grief that you feel is connected deeply to the love that you feel. You know, like they're intertwined together. And so you're not going to stop loving. So how can you stop, you know, grieving? Of course it's going to take on a new form. And of course there's going to come a day as time goes on that you don't feel it as acutely. And it's not as like sensitive on your, you know, on the surface. But there's no moving on because that love did not die, right? Yeah. Okay. So we are gonna go into a time of silence, like I shared. We're gonna do 12 minutes of silence, 1 minute for each month of the past year. We're gonna be honoring, you know, the people that have passed in the last year. And also, if you want to bring in anybody else that comes through in this space of silence, so any other people that you have been connected with that are your kin, that are your ancestors, that also are coming through to be honored in this space, allow them to come through. So we're not going to be really, you know, really boundaried with the last, you know, 12 months energy. What I will say before we go into it, that is, if you are very close to grief at the moment, and at any time during this silence, it becomes overwhelming. You start to become, you know, feeling unsafe. Open your eyes. You can orient yourself to your space. So, like, just let your body know where you are in space. It might be helpful to look at your feet on the ground, saying, like, here I am, I'm here in this space. And if you want to say things that you see or hear, that can help you bring you back to the present moment, and it can help you, come back into a place of safety in your body, and come back to your breath as well. So at any time it feels just too much to be in that space of silence, holding that energy, you please come out of it and then come back in if you want to. Yeah. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to light a candle. If you have a candle and you also want to light a candle, you can go ahead and get your candle. The 5 stages of grief have been discounted clinically, thank God. Yeah. But they're still very much in the collective consciousness. Yep, they are. They are. As I was looking up grief today, just to sort of like connect with that energy, to bring it here and hold that space. You know, the amount of times I saw that, just like on a simple Google search of grief, it's very, very much still in the collective consciousness. Yeah. Hopefully it's shifting. Okay, so if you have your candle, you can go ahead and light a candle. All right, so I have my candle here. And for those of you that have had a beloved, a dear one, somebody that has passed in the last year, if you want to write their name in the comments, we're doing this as a collective group together. So if you want to write your name in the comments so that we can share that out loud, and we can hold that space for you in your grief for them together in our silence. So go ahead if you want to write the name of anybody that you have known in the past year that has passed over and you want to bring to this space. And in this energy, we are remembering, when we are remembering those that have passed, they continue to live on. So here in our collective space, they're going to continue to live on. So if you want to read out loud with me the names of these people, you can go ahead and do that as well. All right, so we are honoring Ocean, Neville, Alyssa, Tadeusi, John, Arturo, Uncle Ronnie, Dylan, Jeff, Lily, David, Sheena, Grandmother Mildred, Millie, Ryan, Pauline, Eddie, Patty. We also want to bring to mind Ramsey, Dee Dee. Yeah, if you want to bring back somebody, if somebody's coming through previously from this year, you can go ahead and bring them in as well. Baba, Grandpa, Nellie, Grace, Meghan, June, Agnes, Mr. and Mrs. Brusso, and my friend's uncle. Dave. You can continue to write the names. I'm going to collectively bring in those in the past year who have died of COVID, those who have died of gun violence, of ecological disasters, those who have died because of white supremacy and police brutality, those who died in war, those who died of disease, of starvation, those who have died of drug overdoses, of accidents, those who took their own life, those of our more than human kin, the plants and animals that have died from climate change and have gone into extinction. If there's any other collective group you can think of and you want to bring in this space as well, you can share the collective group. Curtis, Eugene, Ernesto, Jose Alberto. Siv. Anybody else we want to bring to this space? Any person or collective group? Indigenous deaths, uncovered mass graves. Yes, thank you for that one, Tatiana. Anne and Sam, Chinese and other Asian people that have died from hate crimes. Yes, thank you. All of the refugees. Yes. All of the refugees that have died in search of a better life. All right, so we're going to go into our 12 minutes of silence and holding these people within our minds, within our hearts, within our souls. And as we are remembering them, they are living on. Bringing in the people of Syria, of Iraq, of Yemen, of Palestine, yes. Bringing in those that have died, being unhoused, yes. Babies at the border who died in their cells denied medical treatment. Yeah. Victims of all hatred and repression, yes. Okay. Yes, and the elders, those that have passed on their cyclical journey at the end. Okay, we bring all of these into our heart, our mind, and our soul to honor and hold in our silence. All of those who died from isolation and loneliness, all of those that died because of their jobs, the women who have been victims of hatred and abuse. Okay. I'm going to start the timer. We go into our silence holding these people. And then you'll know the 12 minutes are up whenever you'll either hear the bell or I'm going to read a blessing over us in this grieving space. So that will end our silence together. So if you go ahead and be in a space that you feel comfortable and safe to drop in to this silence together, knowing that all of us are here together holding each other in this space. So you're not alone in your grief. You are not alone in your remembrance. We are all holding this space together and honoring all of these people together that have passed over. So when you're ready, you can go ahead and close your eyes and drop into the silence. Allow this blessing to wash over you. On the day when the weight deadens on your shoulders and you stumble, may the clay dance to balance you. And when your eyes freeze behind the gray window and the ghost of loss gets to you, may a flock of colors, indigo, red, green, and azure blue, come to awaken in you a meadow of delight. When the canvas frays and the currach of thought and a stain of ocean blackens beneath you, may there come across the waters a path of yellow moonlight to bring you safely home. May the nourishment of the earth be yours. May the clarity of light be yours. May the fluency of the ocean be yours. May the protection of the ancestors be yours. And so may a slow wind work these words of love around you, an invisible cloak to mind your life. And so may a slow wind work these words of love around you, an invisible cloak to mind your life. And that is a blessing from the poet John O'Donohue. Just taking a moment to transition back into the present moment, into your body. Taking a few deep breaths. Feeling into that collective holding that we had for each other in that space. We were the ones weaving that invisible cloak of love around each other. And may you be able to hold that space for someone else that may need it from you. Roxanne also shared all children trafficked and abused. Yeah, all people and children trafficked and abused. And the victims of neglect. Yes. All right, we'll end our time like I've done at the end of every day of Yule. I end by sharing just a couple simple rituals that you can do today or tomorrow, whatever you feel invited into. Just choosing one that feels like an invitation for you to enter into that space of honoring your loved ones that have passed over and connecting with your ancestors. So one thing you can do is writing a letter. If someone that has passed and maybe there were, unspoken words, maybe there is something you want to work out between you and them, you can write a letter and either bury it in the earth or burning it and letting the smoke rise. So writing that letter. If you need the space to go through a deeper grieving and mourning ritual, actually creating that space for you, creating a grief space. So choosing a place, choosing a time where you feel comfortable that you can just let go. Whether that means, crying and wailing, whether it means screaming, dancing, laughing, whatever really you need to allow yourself to go through the deeper layers of that process. So making an intention to create that space if you need it. You could sing a song, either, a song that's connected to that person, or singing a lullaby or a lament. I have a really beautiful one that if you are in our circle, I will put a link to. I'll put a link to that song if you want to connect to that. I was thinking about singing it, but I don't feel like I feel like I'm not. Yeah, I feel like I wouldn't do it much justice in this moment. So I'll put the link in our circle. You could visit a graveyard or a burial site or a sacred place to that person. You could also reminisce with photos and stories with loved ones. So don't be afraid to share. Continuing to share stories and talking about those that have passed over. And letting people know if they say anything that's not helpful and that feels harmful to you, like letting them know that, like that hurt when you said that. And by being able to do this, and by being able to bring these stories of death into our collective consciousness, is a way that we can start shifting the culture a little bit to be less death avoidant. So if that feels like something you would like to do. Other things to connect with your ancestors, you can cook a family recipe, and setting a place at your table for your ancestors, or putting food outside, maybe somewhere special and sacred outside for your ancestors. And this really lovely thing I thought about was having an ancestor candle. So having a specific candle that is just for your ancestors, or ones that have passed over to the other world, and having that candle be the candle you use when you work with your ancestors, when you work with those that have passed, and maybe even lighting it on special like significant dates, or like their death anniversaries. I really like that idea of having like that specific candle just for them, and honoring that light. BD also felt your Uncle Dean's spirit. Lovely. A spirit plate. Oh, is that what you call the plate of food that you offer? Okay, the circle name. Let me write this down. Cyclical Living, and then my name. Cyclical Living with Meghan Noreen. If you want to join the circle, if you missed anything in the beginning, or want to go through this again, the recording will be up on my YouTube channel in a few hours, couple hours after I finish my dinner. You can go there and watch it, or you can watch any of the other previous 9 days that we have done, and the themes we have done in our previous 9 days of Yule. Yeah, and thank you for being here. Thank you for coming here with that intention of honoring your loved ones and holding that space for them, holding that space for everybody's grief and loved ones in this collective space. That it felt really special to hold that space, and to be in that silence with you. Yeah, I don't really remember the last time I just was in silence with others. And so that felt really, really honoring and special to do that with you all. So thank you for that. Yeah, thank you for those that have donated and continuing to send that energy back to what you received. That's greatly appreciated. Thank you, BD. Yes, may you all be happy and peaceful. Thank you, Fleda. Thank you, Andrea. If you want to come tomorrow, we're going to be doing a community celebration. So we're going to be honoring the other, the other side of the cycle. We were with the death today, and tomorrow we will be with the life. So we'll be sharing some stories. I will come with some questions so that we can get to know each other a little bit deeper. We might play a game and we might dance. So there's going to be lots of life and joy tomorrow for our celebration, sharing our interconnectedness and community energy together. So if that's something you would like, come and join us. Couldn't attend your uncle's funeral because of your chronic illness. 11 members came back from the funeral positive with COVID, including my sister. I still feel guilt. I felt him wash that clean. Oh, that's so beautiful, Amy. Thank you for sharing that. I'm glad that was supportive space for you to experience that. Yeah, thank you all for being here, and I hope you have time to connect in your own unique way with your loved ones and ancestors as we come to the end of this year and reflect on what and who has passed. Thank you for holding this space with me. I'll hopefully see you tomorrow.